This is you. You don't carry a gun. You don't kick down doors. Your weapon is a 27-inch monitor, a cold cup of coffee that's been sitting there since Tuesday, and a brain that refuses to quit when every rational person in the building has already gone home. You are the most dangerous thing in any room you walk into, and nobody in that room knows it yet. You grew up in Fresno, California, not the pretty part. The part where the news crew only shows up when something goes wrong. Your mom taught 3rd grade and your dad drove a mail truck for 30 years. Honest people. Good people. The kind of people who raised you to believe that if you worked hard enough and stayed smart enough, the system would work for you. Spoiler alert, the system is a lot more complicated than that. You were the kid who read the encyclopedia for fun. Not because you were a nerd, okay? You were absolutely a nerd. But because information felt like power, and power felt like the one thing nobody in your zip code had enough of. You aced every class, got a full ride to UC Davis, doubled in mathematics and linguistics, because why not? And walked straight into the FBI's honors internship program at 22 years old, feeling like you had finally cracked the code. The reality check hits on your first week. They sit you in a basement office in the El Paso Intelligence Center. Everyone calls it epic, and hand you a stack of phone intercept transcripts 6 inches thick. Your job is to look for patterns. No gun, no badge that impresses anyone. Just you, the transcripts, and a database system that runs on software older than your car. Welcome to the glamorous world of intelligence analysis. For 3 years, you grind in the dark. You learn Spanish fluent enough to catch slang that even the translators miss. You learn that cartels don't talk on the phone the way Hollywood thinks they do. There are no dramatic monologues about drug shipments. It's all coded language. Produce, chickens, cousins, construction equipment. You learn to read the spaces between the words like a musician reads silence between notes. You get good. Then you get better. Then one day your supervisor drops a folder on your desk with a single photograph inside. A heavy-set man with deep-set eyes and the kind of stillness that only comes from someone who has made peace with violence a long time ago. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, your supervisor says. CJNG, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. Most dangerous cartel operating in the Western Hemisphere right now. $10 million on his head from our side alone. Then he slides the folder closer and adds, nobody has come within a country mile of finding him in 8 years. The DEA has burned through 4 task forces. The Mexican government has buried more assets trying to locate this man than we care to count. He's a ghost. He taps the photo. Your assignment if you want it. You want it. Here's what the movies get wrong about tracking someone like El Mencho. They show analysts hunched over satellite feeds, watching a specific vehicle in real time. Dramatic zooming, coffee spills, last-minute phone calls. In reality, the work looks nothing like that. In reality, it looks like a spreadsheet. It looks like 47 spreadsheets cross-referenced against each other across a 5-year timeline, with your eyes going square at 2 in the morning while your colleagues are sleeping in their normal beds like normal human beings. You start where every analyst starts, with what's already known. El Mencho's origin story reads like a dark mirror of the American dream. Born poor in Michoacán, picked fruit in California as a teenager, got deported, came back harder. He did time for heroin trafficking in the 90s, watched, learned, and came out of prison in 2003 as something entirely different from what went in. By 2009, CJNG was a startup. By 2015, it was operating in 22 of Mexico's 31 states. By the time that folder lands on your desk, it has reach in more than 100 countries. The man built a Fortune 500 company out of terror, loyalty, and the kind of strategic patience that most people in the legitimate world would kill to have in a board meeting. You study him the way a chess player studies an opponent's game history. Not looking for moves, looking for tendencies. The way he thinks, the decisions he makes when he's under pressure versus when he's comfortable. You map his family tree, his known associates, his former law enforcement contacts, and there are many, because one of CJNG's early signatures was specifically recruiting corrupt police and military personnel who could provide both intelligence and cover. He wasn't just building a criminal organization, he was building a parallel government. 6 months in, you find the first thread. It's not a phone call or a financial transaction, it's a pattern of absence. You notice that every time a major Mexican federal operation drops in Jalisco, every time helicopters scramble or checkpoints get activated, there's a specific cluster of encrypted radio communications in a neighboring state that spikes. Then goes completely dark for exactly 72 hours, then returns to baseline. That 72-hour window is too specific to be coincidence. Someone is warning him. Someone with access to federal operation schedules is giving him a 72-hour head start. Every single time. You write up a 14-page analysis. Your supervisor reads it, nods slowly and says, "Good catch." Then he reminds you that your job is analysis. Acting on your analysis is someone else's department. Someone else's department, you learn quickly, moves at the speed of bureaucracy, which is to say it moves like cement. There are jurisdictional issues, diplomatic sensitivities, ongoing operations that your findings might compromise. The folder sits in someone's inbox for 4 months while El Mencho keeps running the most powerful criminal enterprise in the hemisphere, and the bounty on his head just collects dust. This is the part of the job they don't put in the recruitment brochure. You meet Daniel at an interagency briefing in Washington during your second year on the case. He's DEA. Tall guy, quiet energy, the kind of person who listens more than he talks, which in a room full of law enforcement professionals makes him immediately stand out. He's been working CJNG from the financial angle, tracing laundering operations through shell companies in Panama and real estate holdings in California. You compare notes over bad hotel coffee and realize you've been mapping 2 different sides of the same elephant. His financial data fills in gaps in your communication pattern analysis. Your pattern data explains movements in his transaction records that he hadn't been able to account for. Separately, you're both doing solid work. Together, you're building something that starts to look like an actual picture. Over the next year, you and Daniel become something that federal law enforcement culture doesn't exactly encourage: genuine collaborators across agency lines. You share raw data, not just sanitized summaries. You argue. He thinks your pattern of absence theory is interesting, but circumstantial. You think his financial tracking is exhaustive, but slow. Both of you are right. Both of you push each other harder because of it. The picture gets clearer. You identify the leak inside the federal system. You don't know the name yet, but you know the profile. Someone with access to Jalisco operation schedules, a tenure of at least 8 years, likely retired military with current civilian contractor status. You narrow it to a pool of 31 people. Daniel's financial analysis cuts that pool to 9. 3 months later, it's 2. This is the moment things get complicated, because the 2 people left on that list aren't low-level bureaucrats. One of them is a senior official inside the Mexican Attorney General's office with direct ties to 3 consecutive administrations. The other one is a liaison officer with connections to a joint U.S.-Mexico counter-narcotics program that your own agency has been funding for 6 years. You write the report. 14 pages again, but this time with documentation attached. Financial records, communication metadata, timeline correlations so tight they leave no reasonable alternative interpretation. You submit it up the chain, and then you wait. The call comes 3 weeks later. Not from your supervisor, from his supervisor. A voice you've heard exactly twice in your career, at all-hands meetings, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who lunches with senators. He tells you, in the careful language of someone who has spent decades saying things without technically saying them, that your analysis is being reviewed, that these matters involve significant diplomatic considerations, that your work is appreciated and your career trajectory is very promising, and you should continue focusing on your lane. You hang up the phone and stare at your monitor for a long time. Daniel calls you that evening. He already knows. His report got the same treatment from his side. "We rattled something," he says. "That's either very good or very bad. Turns out it's both." The following month, one of the 9 people on your original list, not one of the final 2, someone lower down, probably a cutout, turns up dead in Guadalajara. Ruled a robbery. Daniel calls you the second he sees the news. Neither of you says what you're both thinking, which is that someone above your pay grade made a decision, and someone paid for that decision with their life, and the actual target is still out there, still protected, still untouchable. You take a week off for the first time in 2 years. You go back to Fresno, sit in your mom's kitchen, watch your dad fall asleep in his chair watching baseball. Think about the distance between the world they raised you in and the world you actually operate in. You go back to work. Here's the thing about a case like this, that nobody tells you going in. You can be right about everything, every analysis, every pattern, every call, and still lose, because the game is bigger than your piece of it. El Mencho didn't build an empire by being smart alone. He built it by understanding at a cellular level that the system has seams, that institutions have interests that sometimes align with his survival, even when they're theoretically committed to his destruction. He's not hiding from the law. He's hiding inside it, but seams work both ways. 18 months later, Daniel calls you on a Saturday morning. His voice is different, tight with something that isn't quite excitement, but is in the same neighborhood. There's been a firefight in Jalisco. CJNG convoy versus Mexican military, which on its own isn't news, but one of the vehicles recovered has communications equipment in it. Military-grade encrypted radio, not cartel standard hardware. Someone leaked equipment, not just intel. And the serial numbers are traceable. You spend the next 72 hours without sleeping. You and Daniel tag-teaming across agency databases, pulling procurement records, tracking serial number blocks, cross-referencing with your existing pool of suspects. The trail is deliberately broken in 4 places. Whoever did this was careful. But careful isn't the same as perfect, and at hour 68, you find it, a requisition order, legitimate on its surface. But it was processed on a date when the signatory was on documented leave. Someone used their credentials without their knowledge, or with their full cooperation and plausible deniability baked in. Either way, it points back to one name, one of the 2 people still on your list. You write the tightest, most airtight 40-page analysis of your career. Every claim sourced, every inference labeled as inference, every alternative explanation addressed and ruled out. You don't send it up the chain this time. You send it sideways, to the joint task force that technically has its own oversight structure. One that includes congressional liaisons who would be very uncomfortable learning that a previous report on this subject was quietly shelved. Then you wait again. But this time, the wait is different. 3 months later, you're sitting in a conference room in Washington with 8 people you've never met, 2 of whom are wearing suits that cost more than your monthly rent. Your analysis is projected on the wall. They ask questions for 4 hours. Good questions. The kind that tell you they've already independently verified most of what you found and are now stress testing the edges. At the end of the 4 hours, the person running the meeting closes their laptop and says, "This is solid work." You say thank you. They say, Mencho is still out there, but the infrastructure around him just got a lot more exposed. The people protecting him are now under investigation on both sides of the border. The 72-hour warning system? It went dark 6 weeks ago. He doesn't know why yet. He's running blind for the first time in a decade. And that, they tap the table, is because of you. You drive home that evening through Washington traffic, city lights blurring in the wet windshield, and you sit with that for a while. It doesn't feel like victory, exactly. Mencho is still breathing. The $10 million bounty is still uncollected. The cartel is still operating, just under new pressure, new exposure, new friction. The work isn't done. But somewhere in Jalisco, the most dangerous man in the Western Hemisphere woke up this morning and made a decision without information he's always had. He moved, not knowing that the shadow behind him is a little bit smaller than it was yesterday. And you already know what he's going to do next. You open your laptop, you get back to work. That's a wrap for today. If you want more deep dives into the real mechanics of how the world's most dangerous people get hunted, not the Hollywood version, the actual version, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button and I'll see you on the next one.